Welcome back to A to Z here on Locked On Sports Atlanta, free on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Search Locked On Sports Atlanta. Our next guest, part of the Locked On Sports Atlanta network, and you can hear his podcast all the time at Locked On Hawks. Just search Locked On Hawks. Of course, he is Brad Rowland joining us here on A to Z. Brad, welcome, brother. Great to talk to you as always, and thank you for joining me.
It's my pleasure, sir. Busy time of year for everybody, but here we are.
Yeah, time of year where everybody concocts crazy trades and ideas on how to make this Hawks team better. Let's start with one thing I said earlier in the week, and it's perplexing to me because I don't understand why the easiest fix is never being publicly discussed. If it's being discussed behind closed doors, great, but if it's not being publicly discussed, and that's the whole Trey, you have to start playing defense as the team leader. Like, you have to start setting an example. You have to start being the guy who's going to give something defensively. We all know the team has to get better defensively. Why do we give Trey a pass? Because in reality, if I told you a year or two ago that you could have a guy on your team that could average 25, 30 points a game and play zero defense, your response would have been, oh, James Harden's available? Because that's exactly, like, at this point, if he doesn't elevate his defensive play, I don't want to say he's going to definitively be that, but that's what it feels like. Am I wrong?
No, it's not wrong. I think that you have to understand what his limitations are on one hand. And at his size, you kind of knew what you were getting on some level defensively. But I'm with you in that he has to be more competitive regularly on defense. It's a very important thing that he has to be. He has to not take the easy way out. We saw that at different times. And there have been stretches where he's been okay. And that's all he has to be is okay. He doesn't have to be great, but setting the tone there would be very helpful. One of the arguments is that maybe if he has more offensive help, he won't have to use so much energy on offense. He can kind of do that more on defense. That's one theory. But I think you're not wrong in that having that baseline be a little bit higher for Trey would set a tone for the rest of the team that would help the team be a lot better on defense, because they kind of just have to be better on the whole. And personnel is part of that, but also having your best player, your team leader, be better is certainly part of the solution as well.
I mean, I don't buy the whole he expends too much energy on offense. Trey drops 25 without breaking a sweat. He makes 5 threes and he's 3/4 of the way there to a 30-point. Like, to me, that seems like you said, it's a theory. It just seems like a little bit of a cop out. And to your point, I'm not asking him to be the defensive player of the year. I'm not asking him to make the all NBA defensive team. I'm asking him just to be average. And average is enough to turn around, because if you look at the teams that made the Final Four of the NBA, right? Dallas, Golden State, Miami, and Boston, they all play defense. And do you have to play to the level of being the best in the league, top 5 teams? No, but you can't be 26th. So there has to be, if Trey has the ear of the owner, and he can say to Tony Ressler, I want this guy, I want that guy. This is what I want this team to look like. And Ressler's going to listen. Ressler should be able to say, sure, I'll do all those things. Show me you're going to play defense.
Yeah, I mean, what you mentioned with those other teams is that none of those other teams that made the Final Four this year have huge weaknesses defensively. They might have one guy that you have to hide a little bit, but Trey is the worst defender on any of those teams. And that maybe is a little bit of selection bias on a 1-year sample size, but generally speaking, you don't want to have any glaring weak spots for the opposition to sort of attack. And Trey right now is still that, and that makes it easy for the Hawks to get attacked on defense.
Yeah, and it just bothers. I'll close on this. It just bothers me that people in our line of work, all the sports media folks in Atlanta, no one is screaming at Trey to play better defense. We've all just accepted that he's going to be bad, and we have to give everything around him to make the team better, but yet we don't have to look at the star to do star-type things, and that's improve their game.
Yeah, it's not wrong. I mean, it's sort of an acceptance phase. I think of what even people like us, even me, I'm guilty of that too. It's like, okay, Trey's going to just be Trey defensively, and I've always asked for him to be even below average. You mentioned average. The Hawks should probably take below average from Trey, because honestly, the below average, especially for a point guard, is probably enough. It's just you can't be way below the below average point, and that's where he usually finds himself.
Right. You can be below average all year long, ramp it up a little bit in the playoffs to make yourself and other guys around you better to help you win playoff series. And that's it. And it just irritates me that it feels like, but me, I listen to myself more than anybody because I talk to myself, but it feels like I'm the only person in Atlanta sports media screaming, Trey, play better defense. All right, let's get into how they're going to make this team better. Tony Ressler has said he's looking for a fix, not an overhaul. If it's not an overhaul, you're essentially running it back with 60, 70% of the same players. So why would I expect any different results?
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if they're going to rue those comments about the lack of an overhaul because they might make one anyway, and then you kind of look silly that you
Yeah.
said that you didn't want to make one. But that's part of that stuff. It gets overblown, as you know, like the public comments of GMs and owners before the draft don't really mean much of anything, and they know that they're going to say whatever they have to say. But yeah, I think that changing over on the margins is doable. And listen, they at the end of the day, they can bank on at least in their minds, that they were really good 2 years ago. And if you sort of work on the margins, that's sort of a selling point. And you still have Trey. What you can't do is just run it back in full. And they've kind of said that they're not going to do that. And that wasn't going to be a sell to anybody. I think no fan was going to be okay with them running it back in full. It just depends on what you do on the margins, because they keep saying we want another guy to pair with Trey on the perimeter as a scorer / creator, and then we want more defense. And those two things are really hard to do at the same time. Most guys who are good defenders are not great creators. And if they are, they're superstars that you can't get. So It's like these two, they're not totally opposite paths, but it's hard to find one guy that does both of those things well. And they know that. And maybe that's why they're tied to draft picks that might be able to do it long term. And honestly, the deals they've been talking about are kind of overhaul moves. They're not really on the margins. It's not like just swapping Gallo out for something else. All the stuff that's been rumored are really more overhaul type moves. And that's kind of interesting to me.
I want to get to the rumors and some of the names in a second, but I want to start internally, specifically with DeAndre Hunter. He's here, right? Like they're not going to move off of him. I feel like it's just a question of what they're going to pay him or how this is all going to go. So how does the whole DeAndre Hunter situation play out?
Yeah, it seems to me that Hunter and Okongwu are the guys who are safe other than Trey. Maybe there's a mythical deal for a star that comes along, but aside from something crazy out of left field, I think Hunter and Okongwu were the guys that are not going to be moved in the near future. But I say all that, Hunter was not very good in his third season. And I still like Hunter. I think there's a lot of upside there. But if we're being honest with ourselves, part of it was maybe injury related, but in terms of his overall performance as a third-year former top 5 pick forward, he just wasn't very good last season. And that was bad timing for him as his extension negotiations begin now. And also for the Hawks, it's a reminder that they are very tied to DeAndre Hunter, both for what they gave up for him in the draft. He's the only guy on the roster that can do what he can do in theory as a big two-way forward that every team wants. And really, the Hawks don't have another out. Like if he doesn't pan out, they don't really have another alternative in that spot, and they know it. I think that's part of the reason why they're probably going to keep him around, is that they can't get fair value for him in a trade right now because teams are wary of his lack of consistency so far in the first 3 seasons. So I think zooming out of the non-rumor realm, his development in year 4 for him next year is perhaps the number one storyline on the whole roster, non-transaction division. Because if he's the guy that they thought they were drafting, this is a lot better team in a lot of different ways, and it's sort of a lot easier to build around Trey and whatever else if you already have that 6'8" two-way forward on your roster.
Yeah, and don't forget, by the way, that Cam Reddish has been here and gone already from that same draft class. And not that I want to give a black eye to Travis Schlenk or anybody else, or and say that it was a huge swing and a miss. They thought what they did was right at the time. It didn't work out. It's always smart to get off of it, right? At this point, it's Cam Reddish is still on this roster. I have more questions than I do getting rid of him. Okay, Rudy Gobert. How does it tickle you? I mean, how exciting?
It's out there. I think that.
Well, here's the thing. See, I get the idea that, look, he's an elite defender. I don't doubt that. The age thing is like, okay, you really do have a very young core. So I'm not necessarily opposed to going to get a 30-year-old plus guy for the next 2 or 3 years to try and see if you can elevate something. The age thing doesn't bother me as much as the contract does and what Utah's going to want in return for him.
Yeah, you mentioned it because Rudy Gobert is awesome. I think people don't like Rudy Gobert for whatever reason, and I get it. Whatever else, he's a really, really good basketball player
because he's K0 in the NBA.
Yeah, perhaps that was what it was, or whatever it is. But listen, he's an elite defender. I think he's a good offensive player. Obviously, he's a little bit one-dimensional, but he's got a lot of gravity at the rim, and I think if you pair him with Trae Young, he would be his best on offense. And in a vacuum, Rudy Gobert might be the best player right now that they can acquire in any deal that I've heard so far. But you mentioned it. It's the age. It's not a huge selling point for me either, but it's the combination of he's making the supermax. He's making $40+ million for 4 more seasons. And like you said as well, Utah is reportedly asking for the moon. That's Danny Ainge. Danny Ainge asks for the moon on anything. So you're giving up a lot of pieces, assets in that trade, and also paying him top dollar. And admittedly, I'm not sure that that's going to make you a title contender. Is it going to make you better right now? Yes. Full stop. Yes. If you want to make your team as good next year, only if that's all you care about is winning games in the regular season next year, Rudy Gobert would do that in a lot of ways. He's really good. But
Does
like,
he
does
make
that
you
raise your
better
ceiling?
than? Does he
Yeah.
make you better than the sixth team in the East right now? Because objectively, that's where the Hawks are.
Yeah, I mean, it might, but does it make you the second team? Probably not.
No.
That's what I mean. It's more of a like if you want to win 50 games next year, if that's your number one only goal is go out and win 50 games next year. Training for Rudy Gobert is probably a good way to try to do that. It's just that I'm not sure if that's a title winning move, and if that's what you want to do because of the age and the contract. It does kind of limit you long term, even if honestly on paper, him and Trey make a lot of sense together.
And oh, by the way, you heard it here first. And I want you to say it on Locked On Hawks as soon as the trade happens. And you say, hey, Zinno told me this on A to Z on Locked On Sports Atlanta. If Rudy Gobert gets traded here, I will bet anybody $100 he does not finish all 4 of those years of those contracts here in Atlanta. He will be gone before those 4 years are up.
I would tend to agree with you. I think it's just so much money. And in Utah, like he's a legacy. He was drafted there. Like there's a lot of great will there. But if you're Atlanta, you're trading for him. And eventually, when he's 32, he's probably not worth the end of that contract. No. And then you're trying, and then trying to shed him. So that's part of the calculus too. Is like you know when you trade for him that the very end of that deal is not going to be great, probably.
Do you want me to play Crazy GM now, or you want to wait till we're done discussing all the Hawks stuff first? So I'll put it at the end.
Mark. I'm here for you.
I know. I'll put it at the end. Other names out there that have been bandied about. DeAndre Ayton obviously is the one that everybody loves. I would argue he's a better offensive player than Gobert, but I would argue I don't know that getting DeAndre Ayton does any more than what you just said that Rudy Gobert does in this short year or two window that you're operating with. Maybe long term, when you can put some more pieces around both of them, it does. But DeAndre Ayton doesn't get you, as you said, to top 2 or 3 in the East alone.
No, I don't think so. The argument for Ayton is that he's 23 years old.
Yes.
He'll be 24 soon. And that's the thing. If you think that Ayton has another leap or two in him, that is the theory behind going to get him, is to pair Trey with a guy who is similar age, same draft class. And if you think Ayton has that, all-star, all-NBA kind of ceiling, that's why you go get him. Because I've kind of said that, like, right now today, is he better than Capella? Definitely on offense. Defensively, Capella is better than Ayton at this moment in time. And I'm not sure how much better on the whole Ayton is than Capella at this very moment. In 2 years, Ayton will be better, almost certainly, because of the age. But you have to really, for me anyway, to trade for him and also give him the max, because that's what he's going to want, is the max contract in a sign and trade. To do that, you have to buy that the number 1 overall pick ceiling is still there for DeAndre Ayton. Not necessarily like an uber elite first team all NBA guy, but someone who could be a top 25 guy in the league, something like that. That's what you have to believe in if you're Ayton. And maybe he can still do that. I'm not sure, but it's a different calculus. Him and Rudy are the same position, but with Ayton, you're banking on upside that we haven't seen yet. And with Rudy, you're banking on him keeping the level that he's already at for a little bit longer.
Any other names out there that interest you, whether it's Jeremy Grant? I mean, heck, even Victor Oladipo might interest me as another piece that could be had. But what are some of the other names out there that you've got your eye on?
Yeah, I think the Jeremy Grant thing has been out there floating for a while, and he is a two-way forward that everybody wants. The asking price is super high, but if you could somehow get him without sort of messing up the rest of your core, that would be the way to do it. Right. That's the question, is that
you keep everybody intact and add Jeremy Grant.
And they're going to ask for John Collins. And personally, I wouldn't want the dude. I think John Collins is better than Jeremy Grant. That's just my opinion. That's not a unilateral opinion, but I think that's my view of it. And Grant's a little bit older and he wants a big contract, and that's an interesting guy. Honestly, I'm kind of waiting for like the sleeper move that we haven't thought of yet. Like something like, could the Hawks go after Miles Bridges in a sign and trade? Like one of those like guys that no one's talking about at all. That's more of a home run swing. And then there's like there's the whole Jaden Ivey thing, which has been kind of floating out there, the number 4 overall pick. That's the definition of a home run swing that makes you worse now, like definitively worse in the moment, because rookie guards, as you well know, are not usually very good. But that's the move where like we think this guy's gonna be a superstar 3 years from now to pair with Trey. I don't know. There's not like one guy screaming at me. There's just a lot of options, and everyone keeps reporting this, and I'm hearing the same thing. There's just a lot of balls in the air for the Hawks. Like there's 6 or 7, 8 conversations happening at the same time, and it's kind of crazy.
I said this earlier, and making the Eastern Conference Finals last year may have been the worst thing that could have happened to the Hawks' development, the big picture, because now there is this rush to get back there, right? Like that did not help them in the big picture view. All it did was hurt them, accelerate the timetable, and force, an issue to be there that isn't really there. And again, that's why I kind of like the Oladipo move. Like, he's so expendable for Miami right now, but I think he's a guy, when you give him consistent minutes, really obviously he's a better defender than anybody in the backcourt that the Hawks have right now, but he can be a plus guy, especially as a full point guard, and you move Trey over just to, me spinning my wheels. All right, we got a couple of minutes left here, and I just want to throw this out there for you because this is how my head works. And I know the money doesn't match up right now, but let's just say in a vacuum, if you really wanted to go crazy, imagine a 1-for-1 swap Donovan Mitchell for Trey.
Oh, wow. I wasn't expecting that at all. I was expecting the Donovan Mitchell alongside Trey, which is definitely an idea people have had. I would not want to do that personally. I think Trey's better, and I think that Trey has.
Really?
Yeah, I do. I think Trey's better.
I think he's better offensively. I think you're getting a more complete.
I honestly think Mitchell's pretty bad defensively too. He's better than Trey because that's like the lowest possible bar, to be honest with you. But I think Trey's better. I really do. Like, overall, I'm not even making fun. I mean, I think that it's actually kind of crazy because Mitchell, as a prospect, I covered that draft. He's supposed to be a defensive first player, and he just kind of just stopped playing defense along the way somewhere. He's got better tools than Trey does defensively. But no, I wouldn't do that. There is that whole idea about Trey and Donovan playing together, but I don't necessarily love that. Some Hawks fans are like, go get Donovan alongside Trey.
No, there's only one basketball.
Really. Yeah,
I mean, it's throwing, for lack of a better way to describe it, it's like throwing Russell Westbrook into an offense with LeBron. Like, there's just one person who's got to be the alpha in the ball handler and the guy who does everything, and that's got to be Trey. And
and then defensively, as we talked about, that would not be great.
You have the worst defensive backcourt in the NBA. So I'm glad I threw you a curveball. I'm glad I was not expecting that. You're not expecting that. I just, if they wanted to get him out, you could pair Trey and Gobert together, just, on the other.
They love each other, famously, Mitchell and Gobert. So there you go.
Exactly. Brad Rowland, Locked On Hawks. You're the best, brother. Thanks for the time, as always. Certainly appreciate it, man. Let's do this again soon.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, take a time out. Come back next and wrap things up here on A to Z on Locked On Sports Atlanta, free on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Search Locked On Sports Atlanta.